Hello, welcome to week 4, the last ever week of Start Your Novel. I really hope that you've enjoyed the first 3 weeks of this course. I hope you've enjoyed meeting your characters, creating your plot, and building your story world. I know I've had a lot of fun writing this, so I hope you've had just as much fun doing all of the exercises and getting involved in the Facebook group. If you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't signed up to this, it's completely free. You just have to go to ferventinc.com/start your novel, and you'll be sent by email, you'll be sent your fully downloadable workbook and bite-sized lesson booklet. So this week, week 4, we're going to be starting our first chapter. Now this is a bit that you could spend like hours and hours and hours thinking about, oh, I'd one day like to write a novel, one day I'll do this, one day I'll do that. Writing that first line, writing that first chapter is half the battle because you're getting started. And quite a lot of the time people put off getting started just because they're afraid. They think they won't be able to do it, they think they don't have what it takes, or they don't know where to start. But now you have no excuse. You should know where to start because you have characters, you have a plot, and you have a setting. So today we're going to watch this video and dive into your very first lesson, and you'll soon be writing your first line. Before that we need to think about what we want out of this chapter. There's nothing worse than sitting in front of a blank screen and just staring at it like that. It's not good. We want to know where to start. So we're going to think about these things before we even put pen to paper or start typing on our keyboards. What's actually really helps me when I'm thinking about all these things is actually to go for a walk, getting out into nature. I take my dog for a walk and I think about these things before I start, but you might prefer to do it a different way, whatever works for you. So to start with, we're going to think about our chapter goals. What do we really want out of this chapter? Where is it heading? What do we want this chapter to achieve? We know we need to use it to introduce our character, our main character at least, and possibly others. We know we want to introduce the theme, the rough kind of what the story is going to be about, show the reader the genre that we're writing in. The reason we need these goals is because we really need to stay focused, otherwise we could just go off on all sorts of tangents when we're writing. So we need to know who's in it, which characters are in it. We need to know which each of the characters want as well, not just about what we want for the chapter. We want to know what the characters want during that chapter. We want to know what the chapter's heading towards and what we want to happen at the end of the chapter. Similar to when you're writing a whole novel and you want to kind of have the end game in mind, you want to do this with each chapter as well. You're going to list your inciting incident that we talked about the other week. You're going to talk about the setting, decide what setting you're going to use, where does it take place. We're going to think about the weather, the temperature, the time of day, the season, the time period. We're going to jot all that down too, because just having that at the back of your mind will help you to bring that in at the right time in your chapter. We also want to list any tension points that we're quite interested in playing out. So perhaps between the characters or perhaps inside one character. We're going to think about our first line, as I said before. The first line is the hardest sometimes because we can overthink and overthink and overthink, because you know that first line is the most important line of the book, because if that line doesn't hook the reader in, doesn't make them want to keep reading, they're not going to. So your reader is going to open that book in a bookshop or a library or wherever it is they are. They're going to pick it up, they're going to look at the back probably, and then go straight to the first page. If they don't like what they see straight away, they will close it and pick up something else. And that pressure can feel huge, but it also can be quite exciting because that is a great opportunity. You've got your reader there. You just need to entertain them and make them want to know more. A first line can take lots of different forms really, but the main ones, you can start with action straight away. If you want to bring your reader straight into what's happening, open with action. You can open with dialogue, which is also a really good way of showing your character's voice straight away. We're going to discuss all of that a lot more in detail in the workbook. You can also start with setting, although again, if you're going to start with setting, do not make it boring. Make that setting work for you. Make that setting show really, really good atmosphere and mood straight away. We can also start with philosophy, which sounds a bit strange, but it basically means it can be an internal thought of your character, or it can be sort of how you state a theme. So think of the opening line to Pride and Prejudice. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man with a good fortune must be in want of a wife. I'm sure I might have paraphrased that slightly, but I'm sure that's more or less it. So that is something philosophical that states the theme for the rest of the book. I'm going to give you an exercise where you get to try all of them out, because sometimes you can just not decide which one to use. So try a few different ones and see which one works best for you. Then after we've written our goals and we've written our first line, we're just going to keep writing. We're not going to overthink it. We're just going to keep going and not try and censor ourselves too much, because then you can get kind of caught up and discouraged, and you are just trying to get to the end of the chapter. You can go back and edit whenever you like afterwards. We're going to keep writing using a mix of all those things I said about the opening line. So we're going to use a mix of dialogue, a mix of setting, a mix of action, and a mix of kind of internal thoughts, maybe a little bit of philosophy, probably not too much. We're going to consider things like, what narrative point of view are you going to want to write from? So first person, I, me, or third person, he, she, they. And see which one feels best for your writing and ultimately feels best for your story, because different stories work better in different with different narrative points of view. We're also going to touch on some of the slightly rarer ones as well in the workbook. But the main thing is just to experiment and have fun, really. Tense is another thing that we're going to consider. So are you going to write it in the present tense? So I walk down the road, I do this, this happens. Or are you going to write in past tense? I walked down the road, this happened, I saw this, that or the other. A lot of readers like past tense if they find present tense a little bit tiring, but present tense can be absolutely amazing for pacing and for just pulling the reader straight into what's happening there and then, which is why it's often used in like psychological thrillers. But I tend to use present tense quite a lot, and I write uplifting stories, so it can work. You just have to make it work for you and experiment and see which feels right. After we've decided all these things about our chapter and we've written the chapter in different ways, and we've got roughly, we've written it in the tense we like, we've written it in the point of view we like, we're then going to do some really good editing. When you're writing your novel, you don't need to edit every chapter after you do it, because it might interrupt your sort of creative flow. A lot of people just want to get to the end of the draft before they do that. I personally, though, do like to edit my first few chapters, maybe first, second, third chapter, because if I feel like my first few chapters are strong and polished, it makes me feel better about the rest of it. And it's also worth noting that it's your first 3 chapters that you typically send off to agents first, initially, so it's really good to have them as polished as you can anyway, really. Another thing that's really good to think about when we're editing, obviously we want to look at punctuation and spelling and grammar and things like that. That's really important, but we also want to think about brevity. Have we used too many words? There's lots of times where sentences can be condensed right down. Readers don't have massively long attention spans nowadays, so short sentences often work really well. And the main thing, one of the golden rules that you've probably heard already of writing, but if you haven't heard it already, I will explain it, and that is show, don't tell. When you're reading a book, it's really quite boring if everything is just spelled out for you and nothing is left to your interpretation, your perception, or your imagination. So just telling someone that they said something angrily, like Daisy said something nervously, that's just telling the reader how that character is feeling, which is fine sometimes, but if you do that all the time, that can come across as quite boring to read. Whereas if you imply or show that someone's feeling a certain way, perhaps with their body language or their action, rather than just saying exactly how they're feeling, that can be a lot more powerful. So there's going to be a nice exercise that tells you exactly how to do this and how to notice which works better. So adverbs, so nervously, sleepily, loudly, those kind of things can often be taken out and replaced with something else. So adverbs are fine, but better to be used sparingly. And there's lots of other ways of thinking about showing, not telling as well. Just drop hints to the reader so they know things, but also have someone else read it for you to check that you haven't made it too abstract and readers can't actually understand what you're trying to say, because I am actually quite guilty of that. And on a side note, it's always good to get someone else to read your work anyway, because you're always going to have missed things. So before you send it off to an agent or anywhere else that you want to send it, have someone look over it, perhaps a fellow writer friend or someone that you trust. I want to say a massive thank you to all of you for coming on this course, and well done, because you have actually managed to get all the way through till week 4. I hope you're really happy with all the things that you've got written in your notebook, or that you will have written in your notebook by the end of this week, and masses of luck with your novel. I hope you enjoy writing your first chapter. I'm going to keep the Facebook group open for everyone that does this course, so that they can keep in touch, share ideas, encourage each other, do a bit of cheerleading. And although this course has started in September, I will still keep everything available for people if they ever want to email me. I will send them all of this information, and the workbook and these videos will be hopefully staying on YouTube, so that people can do it in their own time. So you can even do this again in the future if you like. And a lot of the activities can be repeated with different characters, different settings, and even different novels. So thank you very much again. Have a wonderful week and keep in touch. Bye!